And I think we are live then. If anyone who is watching us live, if you want to comment in the chat, we'd love to say hi to you. We've got Jess Archer from the Laravel Nightwatch team with
Hey
us.
everyone. Oh, I can see some people saying hi.
Yeah, awesome. Nuno Guerra saying hi. Awesome. We've got Cam saying hi, Cam, and of course Florian's in the chat. Nice to see you, Florian.
Good morning,
Florian
Florian.
says, "Yep, good morning." Yeah, for those who don't know, I guess like what time zones are people joining us in from? So my time it is 3:31 p.m. I'm on Pacific West Coast time in the United States, and then Jess, you are.
So I'm in Australian Eastern Standard Time. So I'm on the east coast of Australia, in Brisbane.
How many time zones are there in Australia? Like I know time zones are like
There's,
a weird thing, but
yeah, there's quite a few because Australia's bigger than it looks on like a regular map. So there's like Australian Eastern Time, there's Australian Daylight Time, which is for all the states on the East Coast that do daylight savings, which is basically every state except my state, I think. And then there's another time zone on the opposite side of Australia that's like 2 hours, 3 hours difference or something. And then there might be more in the middle. There probably is. I think Adelaide's like half an hour difference than the rest of the country.
okay. Very nice.
Yeah.
That's funny. I have a daughter named Adelaide, so every time like I've always wanted to go to Adelaide, Australia, just to. I'm not a
Nice.
fan or anything. I just like the name, but
You like the
I
name, yeah.
it sounds like a beautiful place.
Yeah, that's where Michael Dorinda is from.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Yeah.
We got El Sayed from Egypt, and then a bunch of time zones. We got Kia Ora from New Zealand. I like it. We got a 1931 Sao Paulo time. We got Hank in the chat, Mountain Time, USA. So that's my time zone. I think we're the same time then, 3:30 p.m. Yeah, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone who's joining for us on 9:32 in Sydney. There we go. So an hour later than Jess. I only know
Yes.
because I know Jess's time is 8:30. So on record, Josh Siri is not a fan of Adelaide City. I did not say that, just for the record. I'm a fan of the name. I have not been to the city, but it sounds amazing. I would love to go to anywhere in Australia.
We would love to have you.
There we go. I'd love to be there. Yeah. So thanks everyone again for joining. We'll kind of just slowly get started, but as you join, let us know where you're tuning in from. We have the Jess Archer here today, and Jess, tell us a little bit about who you are, and then like what is your role at Laravel?
Sure. So I'm Jess Archer. Who am I? That's an interesting question. I'm a software developer that's been a fan of Laravel for over 10 years at this point, I think now. And I'm fortunate enough to work at Laravel and have been for coming up on 3 years, I
Okay.
believe. So I'm the engineering team lead for the Nightwatch team. Um, yeah, I've built all sorts of cool stuff at Laravel. Probably my favorite thing other than Nightwatch would be Laravel prompts.
Okay.
Tim and I built the Vite integration for kind of replacing Webpack. Yeah, all sorts of cool stuff.
That's awesome. It's funny because I'm for those who don't know and for those who know, I'm very new to the Laravel ecosystem and compared to a lot of folks, especially like yourself. But my the first time I started experimenting with Laravel was right when all of those changes were coming out. So like when Vite was just game moved over. I think I did experiment with Laravel when it was still Mix, like Laravel Mix. But for the
Yep.
most part, like the first application I built was on Vite. And so prompts had just come out or I think it might have just come out or it was slowly come out like the next year or something like that.
Yep.
Awesome. So yeah, you are a living legend in the Laravel community. So in terms of like your kind of before we dive into Nightwatch, as people are kind of still joining here, yeah, this is Jess Archer from the Laravel team, and then my name is Josh. I'm the DevRel, one dev of the DevRel people on the Laravel team. But Jess, what would be like? You kind of said your favorite, other than Nightwatch, is probably prompts. What's one of your favorites? Aspects or maybe like hidden feature of Laravel or any of like the first party packages that you think is like underrated?
Hidden feature. Ooh. I mean, selfishly, the ones that come to mind are ones that I added because they were things that I felt like a real kind of pain point for that I wanted. So to like rattle off a few, when you're writing a test, and as long as you kind of like if you're doing like a HTTP test, if you if an exception happens in the request, as long as like the first thing you do after you make the request is like assert status or assert redirect or any of those sorts of things, if there was an exception thrown or a validation error occurred in the request, it'll kind of like dump that out in the response body. So instead of just getting the standard, oh, the status code 200 didn't match, and then you're like, okay, well now I need to go and figure out what happened. It now like shows you that, and it has done for quite a while. That one still, almost daily. I kind of have that little helper there and love that one. But that's a feature that everyone gets to see. What's another one? Artisan model show. That's kind of a fun one that kind of shows you the database structure of a model and all of its like relationships and properties and casts and all those sorts of things. I see Michael Dorin is in the chat. He's inviting you to Australia to Laracon by the sounds of it.
I did say I wanted to come to Australia. I said I would always love to be there, especially if I got to bring my family with me. That would be awesome for me.
And then the other one that came to mind is the recycle method on factories. So if you've ever kind of been in this scenario where you're creating a lot of like spinning up a lot of models in tests, and you've got kind of a complicated relationship structure where maybe everything's kind of related to it's got a common model in the mix somewhere, but it's maybe like two relationships away. There's a recycle method where you can kind of pass in that one model. So maybe it's like the team that you want everything to be attached to.
Okay.
And instead of creating new teams for every like model that gets created, it'll just reuse that same instance. And so that can be really handy rather than having to kind of define all of the hierarchy of the relationships. You can kind of just define the models that you care about for that test, but make sure that they're all related to like the same parent model effectively. Very
interesting. I like it. I didn't know about both of those, honestly. Well, I knew that they existed, but I haven't gotten to use them. So it's one of those things that interests me a lot. That's awesome. I love it. James, hopefully my audio is a little bit louder now. I kind of bumped it up, so let me know if that's either too loud or still too quiet. Liam asks, before we dive into some Nightwatch stuff, why did you choose to use namespace functions instead of classes for prompts? That could be a hot topic. Let's see.
That's a good question. I'm struggling to remember like if there was like a good motivation or reason for that now.
You could just say because I wanted to. Like that'd be appropriate.
I mean, it potentially is just because I wanted to.
Yeah.
It felt like kind of a nice way to do things. But yeah, I think because we had like a bunch of built-in methods in the command class for doing prompting before, that was always like, this question or whatever it might have been. They were kind of like short method names, I think.
Okay.
If you did classes, I don't know, it just feels a bit different, I guess. I don't know. It's not a great answer, but I like the aesthetics and the usability of the functions.
There you go. I like it. Tim says Tim McDonald from Laravel team, life has never been the same since Jess added that exception visibility feature in tests, the GOAT. So that's from one GOAT, Tim McDonald, to another, Jess Archer. Yeah, it's awesome. I love it. Craig, this little thing, it's one of my Laravel badges from Laracon US. So that's why it's still the wind from my fan is blowing it. So I apologize. It's not a ghost. Awesome. So yeah, Jess, we'll jump right in. First off, before we even get into like demoing Nightwatch, can you give me a story of like how did Nightwatch come to be? So I've heard the story from Taylor Otwell of how Laravel Cloud came to be, right? Like he had this vision for, hey, we want deployments to happen in less than a minute. What's kind of like the story behind Nightwatch? What were you doing at the time within the Laravel team? And then like, why was this something that you decided to jump in on? And how did all of this kind of come to be?
Sure. So I guess like the history of Nightwatch is really heavily baked into Laravel Forge. So Laravel
Okay.
Forge is our server management service that we provide at Laravel, and it's our biggest application. It's our most popular application, our most popular service of all of the kind of the SaaS services that Laravel offers. And so we kind of had this need, and this was 100% driven by Taylor. He had a few key metrics he wanted to see in Forge that he was kind of finding hard to see with the existing tools we were using. So this is before Nightwatch. So this is actually what kind of spawned Pulse. So
Okay.
Laravel Pulse, which is our self-hosted observability tool. So Taylor gave me this list of, I think, about 14 bullet points of just things he wanted to know. And I think originally he just asked me to do like a design for the dashboard, and then just to see what it could look like, and also do like a bit of a proof of concept on how we could capture so much data, but not run into a situation that we have with Telescope. Laravel Telescope, there's so many tools they're kind of mentioning here. So Laravel Telescope is like a local debugging tool, and it collects everything that's going on in your application. But because it collects so much, it's not ideal for production because it collects like request bodies, headers, every single thing. It's just collects a ton of data, and it's not really kind of designed as like a observability tool more so than like a local debugging tool. So that's where Pulse came from, was this kind of how can we get some of these bits of information we want? How can we make it efficient to use in production? And yeah, get those things. So we built that. So yeah, as I said, Taylor got me to do a dashboard design, then a proof of concept for collecting the data. And then it was just kind of spawned from there of like, okay, can you actually go like build the thing now? And then Tim McDonald joined and helped me out with Pulse a lot. So we kind of co-authored Pulse. And Pulse is awesome. Pulse is great. There was a lot of things that there were some limitations, I guess, with Pulse because we're using the database of your application. So we're using, MySQL or Postgres.
Yeah.
And once you get, millions of rows in there, MySQL is great at doing transactional based like lookups with rows. So you can have millions and millions of rows, and it can look up an individual row. It can update an individual row really fast, even with a lot of data. But aggregating on that data to say like, what's the average response time grouped by route, and what are the top 10, all these sorts of things. And it just wasn't really practical to get some of the deep dives we wanted to do, where if you have a slow route, to be able to actually click on that route and then find individual requests to that route, and then click on those and drill in and see exactly what happened inside there that made it slow. So that was really what spawned Nightwatch, was if we didn't have the limitations of a kind of transactional database, what could we build? And so we did a whole bunch of proof of concepts. Taylor had, again, another kind of like bullet point list of like extra things he'd like to know, again, for Forge. The kinds of things that we wanted for ourselves. And like many things at Laravel, they come from our own needs building software. We use Laravel ourselves to build things, so we have a pretty good idea of what stuff would be good. So yeah, that's kind of how it all started. But for Nightwatch, we actually kind of formed a proper team for it. It was, rather than kind of like an open source thing where it was like originally just me and then it was Tim, and we just kind of built it while doing other stuff. We actually kind of formed like an official sort of team for it.
Yeah.
Got designers involved. You can probably tell from the design of Nightwatch that it's had
It
a lot
looks
more care go into that side of things.
incredible. Yeah.
So yeah, we have product manager, we have infrastructure engineers working on it. So it's a pretty amazing tool that we've built, and it all came from just, I want to know a few extra things about Forge. Let's build a free open source self-hosted tool, and then let's go see where we can take that if we had no limitations on technology.
Awesome. I love that. I love that the story pretty much, as with many things at least that I've heard and also seen within Laravel products and open source stuff, it usually just comes from like the need of, hey, we need this, so why don't we build it, kind of thing. So like I love that that is the whole premise, the whole proving grounds of this story. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, before we jump into actually while we jump into the demo, why don't we take a look at it? That'd be awesome. I'll kind of like go through a couple people who have said hi, but for those who are joining us, this is Jess Archer from the Nightwatch team, lead engineering of the Nightwatch team, the Jess Archer, and so we'll kind of dive into just what Nightwatch is. We'll see how it looks. We'll answer some questions. I know some questions about like. Telescope, Horizon, Pulse. We can kind of get those to those in a little bit. But hi on LinkedIn. Nice to have you here. We have from LinkedIn from Syria, someone from Egypt as well, from Brazil. Nice to have you all here. Let me go ahead and pull up this beautiful Nightwatch stream right here. So this is Nightwatch, right, Jess? This is it.
This is Nightwatch. This is the dashboard, kind of the landing page that you land in.
It's so nice,
This
like
is
you
kind
said.
of this, yeah. So this is like the kind of overall application, the most like zoomed out view you can have on your application, like the high level items. Um, Laravel's a web framework. So first and foremost, the main thing we've got at the top here is information about your requests. And these are just overall kind of stats. So at the moment, we're looking at 7 days, but we can change our time period up here anywhere from the last hour to the last 30 days and even do a custom date range. And so here we can kind of see all of the requests coming into the application broken down by status code. So at a glance, we can kind of quickly see over here, there was a little bit of a spike of errors, and we've got some errors distributed throughout. We've got 400 errors and 500 errors, and we've got our successful requests. And because we're trying to highlight performance as well as errors, we also have our duration stats over here where we can see the average and the P95 of requests over time. So over the last 7 days in this example.
Okay, and
And
just for
yeah,
my knowledge as well, I kind of know what P95 stands for, but can you let me know what does P95 stand for?
so P95 is like the 95th percentile. It's a little bit
Okay.
of an interesting concept, and it's one that I kind of originally found a little bit hard to kind of internalize what it meant. In Pulse, we always showed the max duration, so the slowest, the very, very slowest numbers for each route or anything like that. The problem with the max is that if you just have maybe a really, really fast route, but there's like one little blip that happens, like one little network thing with the database where one request goes really, really slow,
Okay.
then if you're in the 30-day view, for the rest of that 30 days, while that data point is in there, your max is going to be up at, say, 30 seconds. So
Ah. Okay.
max shows you outliers, whereas P95 shows you basically what the highest that like 95% of people get. So basically it's
Interesting.
designed to exclude those like extreme outliers, but still show you kind of the general worst case, but ignoring like, yeah, some of those extremes.
Got it.
So
So
it can be just more useful to get a better feel of things.
that makes sense. So it's more useful than an average would be because that would take the average of like lowest and highest, and this would be more of for those who are in the 95th percentile, not including those few outliers that are either too fast. Does that and also include like the too slow or too fast as well as too slow?
I mean, I guess there's no such thing as too fast in
That's
a
probably
web
true.
request, unless you've got like an error that means that no work was done, I suppose. But I mean, at the top here, we do show this is like the kind of the slowest, the very slowest, and the very fastest. So this is like the full duration of everything that's happened. But in terms of then how we break it down, it's always the average and the P95. The average is still useful. That can kind of give you just an overall feel for it. But having that in combination with the P95 just kind of helps you get a better feel of uh, how far apart those two numbers are as well, like how distributed the average is from the P95. And on this screen, we're looking at those numbers across all requests. So it's
Okay.
a little bit of a kind of a muddy or murkier number because it's comparing, maybe you've got a ton of fast routes and then a couple of slow routes, and they're all kind of getting mixed together. So when we start to drill into this, we'll see where we get those things started to break down, where we're comparing, apples with apples effectively.
Got it. So this is your bird's eye overview of everything here on this.
Exactly, yeah. So you'll kind of see
Awesome.
any patterns that are kind of common across the whole application, anything that you might want to sort of zoom in on and find more information about.
Awesome. Do you mind zooming in a little bit just to see
Yeah,
if we
yeah.
can? I don't want to break anything too much, but that's probably perfect. There we go.
Sounds good there. Cool. Hopefully that works on all of the screens.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so we have the request at the top, then we've got some cards about your application. So we're kind of highlighting up here the number of exceptions that were reported, in this case in the last 7 days, and how many users those impacted. So we
Okay.
can see here there was quite a lot of exceptions. This is in a demo sample app, by the way, that's called Skywatch. It's a flight booking app. It's one we use for demos. One of the kind of interesting things with Nightwatch is it's kind of we running it on a lot of real applications, but
Okay.
it's hard to use those real applications for demos because Nightwatch shows you so much,
Yeah.
and shows you things that maybe we can't share. So we have this demo app, so we can see how many exceptions. We have kind of a summary of the slowest routes. So these are routes that are over a 1 second threshold that's configurable. So there's 4 routes that are over that. We can kind of view here to go see the additional ones. And then we have information about your job. So one of the other big features of Laravel is its queuing system. And so here we can see all of the job attempts. And again, broken down by processed, which is kind of when jobs are successful, released, which is when they've been released back onto the queue after a failure, but they will be retried. And then failed, which is when they've kind of exceeded all of their retries. And again, we're kind of highlighting here. You can see the successful ones, they're in gray, but
Okay.
seeing the errors is more the things you want to know about. So that's why those are kind of more, like your eye's more drawn to those. And I think we can even kind of turn off some of these as well, and then really sort of see those breakdowns if you need to. I think up here, if we were to turn off some of these, then we can really start to see that spike becomes a lot more pronounced when you remove that other data from the mix.
That makes sense. Okay. And then when it says the errors have impacted 15 users, how do we know like which ones are users? Like what is that stat coming from?
So those are unique users in the system.
Okay.
So every, let's say like request that happens in the system, if there was an authenticated user at the time, we capture that user so we can determine how many users of your system were impacted by exceptions, whether it was a lot of users or maybe it was just a small handful of your users. So that kind of just gives you that extra bit of context to know, if you had this many exceptions and the number of users was roughly the same, then you could kind of go, okay, well, each user maybe gets one exception, whereas here we can see that the same users are getting a lot of exceptions. And
Yeah.
as we drill in further, we'll kind of see, like we can expand on some of those things and see more of the breakdown.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And then it kind of just makes sense that all these authenticated users is just Laravel authenticated users, right?
Exactly.
We don't have to worry about who's like, we probably in our code, and this might be a good question for you as well. Like in our code, what do we have to do in order to like set that up? Like, is there specific exceptions that we have to send user information with that exception for specific code, or how does that look?
So, I mean, in terms of the authenticated user, it's just as long as you're using Laravel's auth system, we can capture which user triggered the exception. Another
Okay.
cool thing we do is if a job is dispatched from a request and there was a user authenticated in that request, we pass through that user information to the job. So if an exception happens in a job that was effectively triggered by that user, we can also attribute it to that user because
Interesting. Okay.
if a job that they kind of were responsible for dispatching failed, then it's probably impacted their experience. So if you imagine maybe in this example, if you were booking a flight and we dispatch a job to actually go and process the flight, if that job failed, the user that booked that flight was probably impacted, and so we're able to kind of attribute it to that user still. And then in terms of like the information that we capture, it's all configurable. So you can configure what gets sent through. When we come down a little bit further, we can see that we're capturing details about the user, so their email address, their name. all of that's configurable. So if your application, if you don't want to send that information through to us, you can just send through some sort of a like a de-identified identifier, or the de-identified identifier sounds funny, but you can send
Yeah,
through non-personal information to represent that user if you needed to. You can kind of decide how that shows up there.
got it. That makes sense. I guess a question kind of along with that came in is, can users be excluded for the logging? Specific users, maybe?
Um, to exclude like their records specifically, I wonder.
That sounds what it's like, maybe.
We don't currently have anything to kind of say, yeah, don't capture any information about this particular user. We do have some stuff around filtering where you can kind of hook into the process if you need to do those bits and pieces. So
Got it.
the scenario I'm kind of imagining is maybe you don't want your like admin or staff users to get reported in here. If you just want it to be like your user's experience of the application rather than like the admin's. I don't think we currently have anything that will quite allow you to completely cut that off at the moment, but it's something we can definitely look into though.
Awesome. So yeah, this is the bird's eye view of this dashboard. Where do you usually like what's the next step to go from there? Like you see all of this, like as a
List, we
user.
got server information, details about the users, all that sort of cool stuff. But then beyond this screen, I guess there's two main places you can go. I mean, there's a lot of places you can go, but the two main ones for me are probably issues. So we can jump into issues, and this is where we'll see any issues that have been detected by Nightwatch. So this kind of gives you a summary of both exceptions that have happened in your application, as well as performance issues. So anything that's kind of over your configured thresholds will appear in here. So this kind of here you can kind of just see all of the problems in your application in isolation. On any of these, we can click into these and we can see the stack trace. In this case, this one's an exception. We can also see recent occurrences. Typically with any problem in an application, whether it's an error or performance, when you see them in that kind of zoomed out view, you basically want to get in to see a specific occurrence of that thing happening, something that represents the problem, so that you can then go in and debug it. So you could come in here, and in this case, this exception happened from a request. So we could go into this request here and then see what else happened in that request and what caused that exception. And if we solve it for this one, then we likely solve it for all the rest of them.
Very
if we
nice.
come back out again, and we can come to a performance one here, so we can see this job exceeded this 1.5 second threshold. And again, we can see the recent occurrences of this job that was over threshold. So this job might have had other recent occurrences that were under threshold, but this kind of just highlights the problematic ones. And again, on any of these, we can click into this and go to the specific execution of this job and see what happened. So in here, if we kind of zoom out a little bit here, we can see that this one was slow because this mail was being sent. And that's what kind of caused that one to go over threshold.
This timeline view, as someone who has seen some of the demos from Nightwatch and gotten to give a demo of myself at Laracon, I think the timeline view is one of my favorite things. It's just so cool.
Yeah, absolutely love the timeline view for giving you that like to the microsecond precision of everything that happened, all of the different events. You can kind of see them relative to each other. We can, click on any of these and see some extra information. We can jump to like this outgoing request and see other requests. So if this mail, for example, we could click on this one and then we can see all of the other places where this mail was sent and see, in this case, we can see this one's always slow, right? So it wasn't just a one-off. This was something that seems to be always slow. So maybe in this case, our mail provider is slow and maybe there's nothing we can do about it. Or in that particular example, it was already in a queued job. So maybe it's not that big of a problem and maybe we just want to increase our thresholds. But maybe we can also check where our mail provider is located. Maybe they're in a very far away region and we could switch to a closer region. So there's so many different things we can kind of figure out from this dashboard. And within the issues, these kind of like almost act as these containers for information. So again, if we go to, where have I got I think I have like a request one somewhere in here. This one here. broke that one. Let's go to this one. So yeah, again, we can kind of see all these recent occurrences, this kind of summary of everything that happened that represents this problem. And we have this activity feed down the bottom here as well, where we can add comments about the issue. We can change the assignee. So we can kind of use this as a bit of a project management system around this issue. We can set priorities and we can change the status as well. If it's an issue that we like, say it's an exception that we know about and it doesn't actually cause problems, we can set it to ignore and it'll keep happening. It'll keep collecting data about it, but it won't kind of live in that list of problems and we won't keep getting like notifications about that one.
Got it. In terms of like that resolve feature, does what does that look like for additional exceptions that might occur that are similar? Does it create a new issue at that point, or?
So if the issue is still open, so in this particular case here, this one's still open. If additional kind of occurrences of this exception occur, it just updates the last seen time and it'll appear in the recent occurrences, but you won't get like a new notification. So you won't get like slammed with the notifications for every single time this exception occurs. However, if we marked it as resolved, we're saying that we think we've fixed it. If it occurs again, it will automatically reopen the issue and send another notification saying, hey, this thing has happened again. That's for exceptions. With performance issues, if you mark it as resolved and then it goes over threshold again, it'll create a brand new issue for those because it could be an entirely different performance problem. If we kind of kept reopening it for that route, then you'd end up with this like issue that just keeps, potentially getting reopened for that route forever. So we're kind of trying to keep, individual occurrences of a problem grouped together and then starting a new slate when it's probably a new issue.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense.
And so we can see our own issues, ones that are assigned to ourselves. We can go and see resolved issues, and we can go and see ignored issues, which we don't have any of in this example. So after issues, my kind of next favorite thing is probably activity. So this is where we can drill into specific parts of our application. So in this case, we're looking at requests. So we get to see more information about requests than we see on the dashboard because now we get to see a breakdown of requests by route. So in this case, these are all the routes that are in this system, including unmatched routes. So this is any requests where there was no route associated with the request. If we click in these are often where you'll find things like bots attempting to exploit your site, right? So like WP login, this is not a WordPress site, so it doesn't have that. And they're 404s, but they all kind of get grouped together in there. But on this screen, it kind of helps give some context to what we're seeing in the graphs because we can start to see, for example, in this graph here, we've got all these red spots. We can kind of see down here, this is where those red points in the graph are coming from, these three routes here, and the 400s coming from these. And we can kind of zoom in on this as well. And now we can kind of see that in here, this one here is probably the one that was responsible for the bulk of errors in that time frame that we've zoomed into. So we could then click into this particular route. And this route, in this case, we've got some, it looks like it had like an outage that kind of occurred where everything was failing and then went fine again and seemed to have some duration issues during that same window as well.
Yeah.
But because we've kind of zoomed in here and we still have some of the time where things were okay, we're still seeing 200s in here. So we have a few options. We could zoom in further so that we're only looking at the errors, or we could click on the 500s here and kind of just see 500 errors that occurred in this window. Or we could also go in and see requests that are above average or above the P95. And again, we're now seeing that in this particular example, there was errors and performance issues. And if we click on any of these requests that are kind of representing this issue, we can see that there was a gateway timeout from the HTTP client. So in this case, this application is making an external request using Laravel's HTTP client, and that request got a timeout. So that's then impacted our application, both in performance and with an error. And if we scroll down a little bit further, we can see exactly where that outgoing request is there and the exception that was subsequently thrown. So in this case, it seems like the problem is with this Flightwatch service, which is, again, is a fictitious service we made up for this app. So that's kind of an example of how we can zoom in from the furthest out and then come in and find the exact cause of the problem. And in this example, because there was an unhandled exception that was thrown in this request, we promote the stack trace of that exception to the top of the page.
Okay.
So normal requests, you won't see this at the top there, but if there was an unhandled exception, it gets shown up here because that's probably the thing you want to see, right?
Yeah.
If we came to another request that didn't have an error, so maybe this destinations one, we'll just choose a random slow one in here. So there's no exception up there, but we can still kind of scroll down and see what made it slow. In this case, there's this query here that was causing the slowness. And for any individual request, we have this kind of summary of everything that happened. So we can see the number of queries and the total duration of queries. So again, this one here, the request was 2.03 seconds and the time we spent querying the database was 2 seconds. So even from here, we know that it was a problem with a query or multiple queries. We could click on here and see the queries. You might have thousands of queries that are all individually fast, but altogether become slow. But in this example, it was just one query that was kind of causing the problem. And you can kind of see that down there. So yeah, that's kind of the view from, let's go clear this one, of seeing all the requests in the last 7 days or last 30 days, and then being able to zoom into an individual occurrence of either a performance problem or an error and find out exactly what happened there.
That's crazy. There's a couple of things that just blew my mind that one I actually didn't know about at all. Did you click and drag on that view to like zoom into a specific time frame? Is that what you did?
Yeah. So yeah, we can kind of we can go choose this area here. This will be
That's crazy.
Data, and we can keep kind of zooming in and seeing what we want to see there. So this is on that all of the requests. So we've still got a lot of successful requests in here, but because we're now zoomed in, and if we kind of turned off some of these, we can see where those exceptions were happening in there. And again, some of these routes were having problems, but this one here, we can kind of see that for this time period, this is the one that was responsible for the bulk of those problems.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I didn't know about that. I've given a demo of this. I still didn't know about the clicking and dragging. That's awesome. The other thing that I think is crazy and just really cool to have is like this specific query that is slowing down like whatever one of those exceptions. Like you get to drill into, okay, what is the actual query that we're making in your database? Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, we can kind of jump over these. We can come back to them later if we like, but we can also look at queries in isolation. I tend to like to start with these top four, which are kind of what I think of as like a code entry point. So requests themselves, they're not slow by themselves. They're slow because of things that happen inside them. But there could be a lot of things that happen inside them. But the reason I generally want to look at requests first is because that's what the user has experienced, right? Like they don't really care what made it slow. That's just what they've experienced.
Yeah.
So being able to kind of see that it doesn't really matter at this point of view whether it was a query or an outgoing request or anything else that made it slow. We just want to know that it was slow. But there are benefits of being able to zoom in and look at queries in isolation. So on this screen, we're now just looking at all of the queries in the application. These could happen in requests, jobs, anywhere. And so if we were maybe focusing on the database, maybe we were the database person at the company and we just want to kind of come in, we can look in here and we can see the same sorts of information. So we can see the P95s and the average. We have the graphs here showing those overall stats. And so if I sort by the P95, we can see these two queries at the top here have a pretty high P95. They're over our configured thresholds. So these might be the ones that we want to look into. But the other thing you can see on this screen that's really hard to see on the request view, for example, is this total column. So if we go out to 30 days here, we can see that this query here has spent a total of 33 minutes running queries over the last 30 days. Now, this query doesn't run super often, but it is kind of slow. So that's why it's got so much time. But then there's this query here that's pretty fast. It's not amazing, but it's not super slow. And you wouldn't necessarily see this if this query happened just once in a request. It's not going to make the request super slow.
Yeah.
But here we can see that it still contributes to 31 minutes of total query time in this 30-day period. And that's because this query is run so many times. So you can imagine if we were able to improve the performance of this query even by half, then we could actually have a pretty significant kind of improvement over the total month. And when you're looking at real applications, so when we've been looking at this with Forge, we've seen some queries that represent this problem exactly, where we've been able to go in, tweak some indexes, and improve those queries.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, that's crazy because it sounds like the whole goal or like the takeaways that you want from a lot of these pages are not necessarily knowing, okay, where are my users having issues. Oh, that's it seems like that's one part of it, but the second big part of it is where can my application be better that you might not
exactly.
experience from users who might be writing in saying, hey, this is slow or I can't access this. It's all those little things that add up, like with these queries.
Exactly, yeah. And fixing some of these things that aren't super slow can have all sorts of positive impacts. Maybe you don't need as big a database uh, as before, or maybe it helps other queries go faster because the database is not as tied up as often running these frequent, kind of slow but not super slow queries. It gives the database more time to process the other queries that are maybe slow by necessity because they're doing, much heavier workloads. Um,
Awesome. Well, I'll there's a couple questions I'd love to just zoom through if that's okay,
yeah,
real quick.
definitely.
The first is someone was asking about P99 as well as P95. Is that something that you've thought about or?
We have thought about it. We don't currently have anything other than P95. It's certainly something we can add. From like a technical perspective, that all of the percentile aggregations are by far the most kind of expensive to run from a like resource perspective. Um, Doing like a rolling average is really, really computationally simple to continue adding to an average. But a P95 or any quantiles, they're much harder to kind of do over a 30-day period because you need to kind of have the whole data set to find what those numbers are. You can't just kind of continually roll it forward. So we do need to be a little bit cautious with the number of percentiles we use to keep Nightwatch fast and performant. But there are little things we can do. So if there is enough demand for P99, like we could potentially add it. Maybe it's a case of you choose whether you want to see P95 or P99 rather than necessarily having both on the screen. But those are things we can investigate. Uh, as we kind of put this out into the wild, we learn more about people's use cases. We're already in early access. We've got a number of early access people in here that are already giving us great feedback. As I've kind of said, we built this for what we thought was good, what we needed for Forge. But there's a lot of other applications out there, and so we'll continue to refine this and continue to add features as we learn what other people need. So I'd be very curious
Yeah.
to know like what kind of use cases P99 might work better than P95, for example. It really would just be, I guess, excluding less of the outliers, but still excluding some of them. I think for really, really high traffic applications, that might become more important where there's a lot more data, and so that 1% of outliers is a bigger number, or let's say the 5% of the P95. That 5% of outliers actually becomes a pretty big number of people.
That makes sense.
So that's yeah.
Yeah. Another one. Will there be light mode? I think you have to call it light watch at that point.
Yeah, or day watch.
Day watch. There you go.
Yeah, there will be. Yes,
Oh,
I'm not
wow.
sure. Not sure when, but we definitely have plans to do light mode. We know a lot of people want light mode, so yeah, it's definitely on the backlog.
Awesome. With information capture and storage in Nightwatch, is it possible to configure where the data is stored? For
Yes.
example,
So
databases in Europe.
yeah, so we plan on having multi-region support. So when you set up an application in Nightwatch or when you set up an environment, you can choose the storage region where that data will be saved. And we'll continue to expand which regions we do support, basically based on user demand. But I know here in Australia, if you're doing any work with the government, then the data has to be stored in Australia. And obviously, EU has similar things. I know Singapore does. So we want to make sure that we accommodate all of those different scenarios.
Yeah. Along those lines, what is the retention period for traces, or I guess like how long is this information being stored, or what's the limit?
So at the moment, the data is stored for 30 days. We may look in the future at extending that for people that need longer than 30 days. But at the moment, we kind of have found that 30 days tends to give us a really good balance of kind of being able to see patterns that occur over a month, while not kind of storing a whole lot of useless data that ends up increasing the costs of storing it, all those sorts of things. So yeah, 30 days at the moment.
That makes sense. Will Forge and Cloud have one-click enablement for Nightwatch?
Yes, you'd still have to install
Or is that the goal, I guess?
Yeah, so you still have to install the package in your application, so it still has to be a dependency. So there is like a code change to install the package in your application. But in terms of like running the agent, all those sorts of things, absolutely.
I guess like that along that question, maybe we can show. We don't need to show this if not, but how do you use it? Install the package, put the DSN. What are the options with that?
Sure. So install the package. So Composer require Laravel/Nightwatch. When you go and create an application, so I can come in here and create one. So you put your application name. You'll configure your first environment. So by default, production, but you can call it whatever you want. You've got your storage region. You can put in the URL for that if you want, so we can create some links for you. You can also choose a color for the environment. And then after that, you'll install, go through it. So we'll say test app. And that's all good there. You can upload an icon for it. So yeah, so we install the package. Then there's just a single configuration, which is the Nightwatch token for this environment. So you'll just add that to your environment wherever you normally would, whether it's in your .env file or in the environment for your server. And if you want Nightwatch to capture logs, then you'll also want to configure the log channel for Nightwatch. And that's it. You've then just got to run the agent. So if we go to the next step, you just run PHP artisan Nightwatch agent. And the reason we have the agent is you imagine your application's getting, hundreds of millions of requests coming in. Rather than send information to Nightwatch during the request lifecycle, even if we do it after the response has been sent, it still ties up that web worker so that it can't go and handle the next request. So by running a local agent, those web requests can just send their metrics to the agent and get on with the next request really, really fast. The agent then just batches them up and sends them up to us every 10 seconds or 6 megabytes, whichever comes first.
Got it. Okay, that's very interesting. So in that sense, like in a lot of ways, having Nightwatch is no there is no downside for your application. It's not like it's going to slow down your application or your users are going to see slower responses because it's having to send to Nightwatch because it's being sent to this agent and then batching it off.
Yeah, I mean, any performance monitoring tool will have a small impact on performance. It's impossible to observe a system without putting some overhead, but we've put in a lot of effort to keep that as absolutely minimal as possible. Yeah. The code for our data collection package, we kind of use the most low-level PHP functions. So we're not using things like collections that can use that extra little bit more memory. So it does mean that we don't get to use some of the nicer features of Laravel because we just want to keep it as low level as possible and really conscious of how much memory is being used.
That makes sense. That kind of falls along with this question of like, is it using open telemetry under the hood or is it completely custom for sending?
So it's completely custom at the moment. We did look into open telemetry, but we found that it was going to make it harder to make the thing really, really fast and to capture all the kind of stuff we wanted about Nightwatch. It was basically going to slow us down. There's definitely room to explore it in the future. But for this kind of initial round of things, we found that building something specifically targeted for Laravel gave us the ability to really optimize things as much as possible.
Awesome. And then one more, and we can keep going, is the agent long-running command? Like, does it have to be run on a daemon, or is it kind of a one and done? I'd imagine a daemon, just from what you were saying about the sending it in batches.
Yeah, so it's a long-running process.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay, so we've seen the specific like queries and exceptions that you're diving into, as well as like the overview. What's like the next thing of even just like from within Forge that Nightwatch is using? Someone even asked the question of, is Nightwatch using Nightwatch for Nightwatch? I think the answer is yes, but what has been the most valuable to you, like within those circumstances?
So yes, Nightwatch is using Nightwatch to debug Nightwatch, which is always kind of funny. It's, like you'll be using the dashboard and then something's slow. Like we run a lot of heavy queries, so we have queries so we can go in and actually see which query specifically it was. That's been really, really helpful. Nightwatch has been by far the best way to debug Nightwatch and fix any errors and make it faster.
Someone should make like a meme where it's like, it's like Night Watch, watching Night Watch, watching Night Watch kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah. And so we have, like the staging version of Nightwatch monitors itself, so it monitors staging. And originally, I had in my head that was going to cause this like feedback loop of like infinite, like it's going to generate an error and send it. But the truth is that if you're on a page in Nightwatch, there's a specific page. If you're on the page looking at an individual route, you can refresh that page, and every refresh will effectively trigger it to capture metrics about that page, which will then show up in the next refresh. So you can just sit there and refresh it and watch these counters go up. We do use it a lot on Forge. That's kind of, again, what we built it for, and that's where we've Forge being like an existing application that's been around for a while and has a lot of users. Forge has, I think in about 30 days, does about 3 billion database queries.
Oh, wow.
And at the moment, we have 100% sample rate in Nightwatch, so we can see all 3 billion of those queries, both in aggregate and zooming into an individual query. Being able to find, to see all of that information has been incredibly helpful. The scenarios where we can kind of more easily see things like N+1s, but we can see queries that have caused problems. We can see the flow-on effect. So if we're looking on the query screen, we can drill into the request where that happened and see, which request or which route that slow query was impacting. I have a cool example in here I do want to show, which I think is this one. If we go to an example of this query, we can see what an N+1 looks like in Nightwatch. So you kind of have this waterfall cascade where, again, all of these are individually fast, but because there's so many of them, and this is actually a pretty small example of an N+1 in the scheme of things, it does kind of extend how long the controller phase of this request took. So yeah, I mean, similar with exceptions, we can kind of zoom in and just look at exceptions in isolation. Again, I do still like to look at those generally from the requests perspective and start from those outside in, or again, looking at jobs and seeing what errors were occurring. There is a nice thing though in exceptions where we can see handled exceptions. So you wouldn't normally see these in the request screen because you've handled them and returned, let's say, a 200 response, but there was still an exception that was thrown. Being able to come in here and see those handled exceptions is really nice. And, again, we can click on any exception, see the stack trace, and see the recent occurrences. So we can jump into the request where that happened, and we can see that exception right there. So yeah, for using it on Forge, there's been quite a few things where we've been able to spot issues that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to see. We've seen, attacks like DDoS attacks on particular endpoints that didn't have didn't take the application down or anything like that, but we were able to see them and see the patterns and then go and put in mitigations to prevent those from happening. There was a particular example where we had requests where we had a query that was particularly slow. We had deferred it because we knew that it was slow and it didn't have to happen in the request lifecycle. But it was still impacting other requests because those web workers were still kind of tied up doing that deferred query. So we ended up moving those to a job and also improving the query performance with indexes. So there's just been a wealth of stuff. I'm constantly getting messages in our internal feedback channel of oh, Nightwatch helped solve this particular problem, which has been fantastic. And getting the feedback as well of other things where they maybe couldn't find information as much as they wanted, we were able to go in and improve the experience and improve the features in Nightwatch.
Okay, I think that's a really key part of we know that Nightwatch, for those who weren't here at the very beginning, you kind of mentioned that Taylor kind of gave you a list of, hey, these are things that would be really cool to see in Forge, and that's where kind of Pulse and then eventually Nightwatch came to fruition. Are there, we kind of seen a lot of these screens of requests and exceptions and queries. Are there any features or pages that have already been built within Nightwatch that have come out of, hey, we need this in Forge, or we need this while watching Nightwatch?
Um, I think like there's probably like a lot of little features,
Hmm.
lots of little bits of information to put, like just extra context to help debugging particular issues. If we come down to logs, for any of these logs, we can see like all of the context that came along with the log.
Okay.
One of the great
Yeah.
things here is that we can see the request or the command or job where this log line came from. And again, we can jump straight through it. We can see here a preview of like, we can see this log came from this request to this put request to flights 29. And we can click on this request. And again, we can see the logs that happened in that request also shown in here. So that context is all together and everything's all linked together. So no matter which angle you kind of come into Nightwatch from, whether you're looking at queries or logs or anything, you can always tend to get to the other screens that give you that extra context. So yeah, that's been super helpful to be able to find out what's been
Awesome.
happening in various Forge requests.
I love it. I love it. I think this question could lead into showing something really cool. So, is there a view to see requests made through the HTTP client to monitor what APIs you're calling?
So we have a whole section here on outgoing requests. So this is where we can see the outgoing requests being made by your application using Laravel's HTTP client or using Guzzle directly. So at this kind of top level, we have a breakdown by the different domains or different host names that you're hitting. So we can kind of see a summary of what we're doing in here. We can see the same sorts of information, so the number of outgoing requests and their durations. And on any of these, we can click in and see the individual requests that are
Oh,
happening, their
wow.
status codes, all these things, and their durations. And of course, we can then jump in and see, in this case, the job where this particular outgoing request was made. So
Yeah.
that was that outgoing request there highlighted, so we can see where that was in context with everything else. So yeah, outgoing requests is where you can kind of see everything that all of the outgoing requests made by your application.
I could see how if you have a if you have an application that does anything with AI, like AI API calling, I could see how that would be like a fantastic page to have, because there's
Definitely,
always
yeah.
errors within those.
Yep.
What about the those notifications, mail, and cache pages? What's the overarching theme of what would you look for in those to maybe better your application? Like when you're looking into Nightwatch, you see things that are happening in notifications and mail or cache. What are things that you're looking at even in Forge, for example, that help you pinpoint improvements?
So if we come to mail and notifications are generally pretty similar. So these are our kind of mailable classes, and these are our notification classes that the system is using. We can see the total number of notifications sent and their average and P95 durations. And we can then come into any of these and then see each individual notification that was sent, the channel, the duration, all these sorts of things. If you've got something that's particularly slow, so if we looked at maybe this flight created one, these are taking a bit of time and it's happening in this request. So we can see that this request here was just over a second, and most of that time was spent sending a notification. So in this particular example, we could probably queue this notification and put it on the queue. It's not going to make the notification itself faster, but it will make the request faster. So kind of seeing
Okay.
those points of like, what's the impact of this slow notification? And as I kind of talked about previously as well, maybe there are things you can do to make these faster in
Yeah.
terms of the provider you're using, the region they're in, all those sorts of things as well.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, no one's going to complain about their receiving, and they might complain, but no one's going to complain on average if they're receiving like a notification email or something like that slower. But if it happens frequently, then there might be something you can do.
Yeah, like a 1 second delay on getting a notification is nothing, but a 1 second request, you actually feel that in the browser, right? Like
Yep.
that kind of feels slow. So that's a really quick win, is just pushing those things into the queue to make your application feel snappy. And people will still get the notifications. It'll feel effectively instant. Like 1 second is effectively instant for receiving it, just not for clicking on a page.
I love that. I love how the theme, at least like from what you've been saying and kind of like what all the questions and everything you're showing kind of shows, it's like the theme of Nightwatch is you get to make better Laravel applications because you know exactly what might be happening behind the scenes that you wouldn't otherwise have insight on.
Exactly, yeah. There's so much stuff that happens in an application when it's in production and is often quite different than how you would experience it locally. A lot of database queries, even with bad indexes, can be really fast locally because there's not much data in there, and it's only once they get into production that they get slower. Sometimes a query might be fast for some users and slow for others because the other user might have more data that's being filtered through. So being able to kind of see what's happening in production when the rubber meets the road is really helpful, and being able to see that across all of like Laravel's first party features, mail notifications, outgoing requests, all that sort of stuff really just helps you really understand like what you've written, how that actually runs for real users. And you can set this up in your staging environments as well, so you can kind of, especially for exceptions, if you're doing like a QA process, you can kind of see those that maybe didn't happen locally, but maybe they do happen in staging, and fix them before they end up in production. Um, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I think we kind of saw a glance of it on the dashboard view, but can we see the top users in regards of lengthy queries? So can we see what specific user might be having a query or request?
Sure. So we can click on our dedicated user screen where we're getting a breakdown now of everything
That's so
by
cool.
user. So this is where we can start to see the experience of individual users. So we could filter by 500s here and see that Tim is getting a lot of 500 requests. A lot of these other users aren't getting 500 requests, so there's something happening here. So we could click into this and see those individual requests and figure out what the problem was. Um, so for any given user, we can click on them, and then we can see kind of a dedicated page about this user. So this kind of shows, when Tim was last seen. We can see all the requests that Tim's been making. We can see the top routes that he hits. We can see the slowest routes that he hits, the top queued jobs that he's kind of responsible for. Um, and then we can also see the individual requests that Tim has made through the system. So this, we can kind of see how he's traveled through the system, 2 requested destinations and a posted flight. So we can kind of follow through exactly what's happened there. So especially if you're working in maybe customer support, or you've had a report from a specific user, being able to come in here and kind of just scope down and see just this user in isolation, what's been happening. That's kind of what these screens are designed for, and we can go in and see all of the 500 errors that Tim's been experiencing, and see whether they were something specific to his account or whether it's a general problem. So,
What kind of mischief Tim's getting into, kind of thing? Like
yeah,
what
Tim's
what kind
always
of
getting into mischief.
what kind of routes is he trying to access that he's not supposed to? In a lot of
Yeah.
ways. This page, I think, is like one of my favorites, at least from like a support perspective, because I've spent a lot of time in support and I help out with support on the Laravel team. It's one of those things where being able to dive into a specific user and be like, okay, yeah, you did hit this page, you did hit this particular error, and this is the reason why. Like having that so tightly integrated with authentication with users is huge in my mind.
Yeah, it's just there's so many lenses, I guess, in Nightwatch of how you want to look at things. If you want to look at requests in general, queries, specifically, or even look at a specific user, depending on the type of problem you're trying to investigate or be made aware of, having those different views on the data becomes really important.
Yeah, and then there's I think there's one question. Can I use Nightwatch to monitor my scheduled commands? So I think we kind of glossed over the command view, but I believe there's a way to do this, right, Jess?
There is, yeah. So we're still finalizing a few things on here, but I will show what we've got at the moment. So this is the list of all of the scheduled tasks that are running in the system. So we can kind of see we've got some action classes here, some jobs. We've got some scheduled closures, scheduled commands running as well. So we can see the schedule, if they've been failing, when they're next due to run, all those sorts of things. And of course, any of these, we can kind of jump in and see the individual occurrences of those. So this one here appears to run on the hour, and dive in and kind of see if there were any problems with those. And yeah, this one was every hour, so it shows it right there. We have some more plans for the scheduled screen to kind of give even more information on that. But yes,
Awesome.
we have schedule tasks in here.
I love it. What about the servers and deployments page? Like what's the gist of those? What's going on there?
Sure. So servers is basically the same sorts of things you could see on the dashboard. So these are all the servers that are serving your application, whether they're web servers or queue servers. Um, you can report the CPU and memory usage of those servers to kind of
Okay.
see if there's any problems going on there. Also, the disk usage. That tends to be one of the big things is is the server running out of usage. And this bottom server here, this web oh no, this one's hasn't reported for 1.5 hours, so it's kind of showing in an error status at the moment.
Okay.
So we can kind of see that breakdown. This kind of high level summary of the servers that are serving the application.
I guess like
and then yeah.
sorry to jump in, but yeah, like with that, does this mean like these are multi-server environments? And this question says, how do you like synchronize that data, that telemetry data that's being pushed to Nightwatch? Is each one of these servers pushing data, or how does that work?
Yeah, so each server will have a local agent. I mean, depending on how you set it up, if you've got like multiple containers serving the same application, you could have a single agent that they send to. But yeah, every server that's basically running your Laravel code can be monitored, and all of that data then comes into one sort of screen. If we were to come to a particular request, so hopefully we've got a good example here. So we can see here the server that this particular request was processed by. So if there was a particular problem with one of your servers, you could kind of see which server was processing that request. So yeah.
Very nice. That's awesome. And then that deployments tab, like what does that mean?
So with Nightwatch, having the ability to send every time you make a deployment, you can send basically tell Nightwatch that you've made a deployment with whatever version you're using, whether it's a Git tag or whether it's a specific version number. Being able to tell Nightwatch that means that we can attach that to all of the metrics that are coming into your application. So this is really helpful for things like exceptions, to see like maybe a particular exception only started after a particular deploy. I don't think is there any examples in here of a failed deploy? Maybe we go by failed. No, that one's not working. But yeah, so being able to see those deployments and have that deployment information attached to all of the metrics that are generated from that, tends to be very helpful for those specific types of issues.
Awesome. I love it. Is there any other page or any other feature that you're like, hey, this has been incredibly valuable for us, like as we continue to build out Nightwatch, or as you collect information from Forge? What's the thing that you'd like to show us next?
I mean, personally, my favorite is requests. Because building web-based applications, obviously, this is kind of Laravel's bread and butter. This is generally what's most users are experiencing are requests. So this is where I like to come in and see, how can I make things faster? So when we're using Nightwatch for Nightwatch, being able to come in here and find out specifically which pages are slow and specifically which queries, in our case, are making those slow, and then fix those up, deploy the changes, and then kind of confirm whether or not those actually had the intended effect in production, to me is kind of my favorite way, or like my favorite thing in Nightwatch is making Nightwatch fast using Nightwatch.
That's cool. Making Nightwatch fast using Nightwatch. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I still can't get over that you can click and drag to zoom in. Can you do that one more time for me? Just like
absolutely.
I'll clip this later.
Okay, so this is a 30-day view. So every request, every bar on this graph here is about 8 hours worth of data. So we can kind of see that with this data shape, there's kind of these like spikes that are happening here, and then there's some lulls. And because it's 30 days, we can kind of assume that these are weekdays and these are weekends.
Yeah.
And then within those days, we can kind of see that these are probably like during, like the business hours, and then there's kind of a lull at night each time. But we can kind of zoom in on this, and now we're looking at roughly a week's worth of data from what I kind of selected there, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days of of data in there, and this is now zoomed in to every 2 hours. And so then we can kind of again zoom in again and see that zoomed in view of everything that happened roughly in this day. And yeah, we can just keep going in and seeing what we want to see, finding what's slow, clicking in, and this filter follows you as well. So if
Yeah.
you've started out here and found that these were the ones maybe you want to investigate, when you come in here, you're still seeing that same data, but now it's scoped to this particular route.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So yeah, having that kind of follow you through is really handy. These are all the requests that happen in there, and then being able to then filter to just the 500 errors, for example, really lets you narrow down. And another really cool thing here is if there was an unhandled exception, we show a preview of the exception message right here in the table view. And we can, of course, click on this and we'll see the full stack trace and an error that occurred there. And again, when it happened down here. So this one happens after this cache, for example, there was this exception. We can dive in, go to this particular controller on this line and figure out exactly what happened.
That's crazy. I love it. I love it. People in the chat, like, am I like, I get so like I'm starting to not even know what to say, but like the ability to click and drag into it. Like I was here thinking, oh, I'm gonna have to like enter in my filter. I want Monday this time to that time, but just being able to click and drag, that's crazy, right? Everyone else agrees with me.
Yeah, for the most part, like using the relative time filters is
probably enough, right?
If there's a particular area you know about, like you can come in here and put in the very, very specific times that you care about if you're kind of aware of something. But most of the time, yeah, clicking and dragging gets you zoomed into kind of the area that you want to see. So
that's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Sweet. Do you want to answer some more questions? How you doing on time? Awesome. Someone says, are there any plans to release Laravel integrations and drivers for ClickHouse in the future?
I would love to. There's a few open source PHP SDKs for ClickHouse and some Laravel kind of wrappers around those, and that's what we're using at the moment, and they're great. I have found there's some pain points that like I personally would want to change. It's just a case of kind of finding time when we're not building Nightwatch to go and improve those things, but I would love to at some point. I don't know how many Laravel users would be using ClickHouse. ClickHouse is a very kind of specialized database for pretty specific use cases. But if you have those use cases, having really nice support is always a good thing. But we have had, as I said, we're using the existing open source packages out there to build all of the stuff you've seen here. And yeah, they're fantastic.
Yeah, for those who didn't get the chance, you should go watch Jess's Laracon talk from last year's Laracon US. This was even before Nightwatch had even been announced, and it basically dives into everything that you learned, I think, in order to start building Nightwatch. And it goes over my mind. I've watched it like 3 times, and I still don't understand half of it, but it seems like ClickHouse is crazy.
It is, yeah. So yeah, that talk it's almost a behind the scenes of Nightwatch before we'd even announced Nightwatch. When I was, thinking of talks I could submit, ClickHouse was the thing that I was so excited and passionate about, and I wanted to, like, that was where my headspace was. I was still learning about, analytical databases compared with transactional databases, and it was just, it was what I was excited about. So I thought, okay, can I do a talk on this? Without kind of giving away too much about what we're doing. I did drop a little hint at the end of, if you want to know like why we're using it, then tune into Laracon AU. And of course, the whole talk was effectively stuff I learnt building Nightwatch. For that talk, I used, so Stack Overflow publishes all of their data online. You can download this like multi-gigabyte export of all of Stack Overflow's posts and comments, and with all of the votes and everything. So that was the data set I used. I loaded that all into both MySQL and ClickHouse, and kind of showed what queries MySQL is really good at, but also what ones MySQL struggles at, and then how ClickHouse, for those ones where MySQL was slow, how ClickHouse can do it in, milliseconds compared with sometimes like 60 seconds timing out with MySQL. ClickHouse can do that in milliseconds. And even the things that MySQL is better at, ClickHouse was still pretty fast at. But it's not the kind of thing where you then only use ClickHouse. You generally, so like for Nightwatch, for example, we use a transactional database and an analytical database, and it's a case of putting the right data in the right place for how we need to use it. So All of the metrics data is in ClickHouse. Um, but things like issues, they live in our transactional database because those are kind of like long-lived records of
Okay.
issues.
Okay, that makes sense. In terms of the Skywatch demo app, is there any plans to maybe have that as a demo environment within Nightwatch for people to play around with fake data?
It's not something I'd actually thought of. I mean, it's possible. So the Skywatch app is primarily a seeder rather than like a full application. We do have another application called WeatherWatch. This is a real application that generates, I think it's basically just one page that we can use to test a few bits and pieces. We have a whole lot of other internal test applications that test all the different edge case scenarios. This is one we kind of built for Laracon EU to demo installing the Nightwatch agent. But the Skywatch application itself at the moment is really just a really complicated seeder that creates, like, you can kind of see these usage patterns of data happening over weeks and all that sort of stuff. That's all from a seeder that's making that information.
Okay.
We kind of need the ability to spin up something that's, yeah, that has realistic usage patterns. I think if we drilled into like a particular user, we'll go back to Tim, for example, we can see that Tim doesn't actually make requests, at nighttime, his time, right? So it's very, very detailed and specific in trying to make things as realistic as possible. That Tim doesn't click on Skywatch 24 hours a day. He has usage patterns that go throughout the week and less on weekends, all that sort of stuff.
Awesome.
I honestly feel like I could do an entire talk on how our seeder works for this thing because it's pretty fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, it seems like there's a lot going on behind the scenes, even for fake data and this demo application, for example, as well. What about like snoozing an exception? So can you like say like notify me again if this happens X number of times?
Interesting. So at the moment, it's just a case of being able to ignore it, but then you'll never get notified about it.
Okay.
If you resolve it and it happens again, then you will get notified. But if it happens, a minute later, it'll reopen it and you'll get notified straight away. So in terms of like X number of times or happens after a certain amount of time, we don't currently have anything like that, but I could definitely see benefits of having that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. What kind of detail do we get on the JavaScript front end? So I don't believe Nightwatch does this, but what can you speak to in terms of like the bugs that don't pass through the back end?
Sure. So the JavaScript side of things to me is kind of the only real thing that to me feels kind of missing from Nightwatch at the moment is what's happening on the front end. And we have plans for after we launch to start going deep on the JavaScript error monitoring and potentially performance side of things. So it's not something we have at the moment, but it is probably the one of the top priorities, if not the top priority on our backlog of things we want to add to Nightwatch. At the moment, we're kind of focusing on very specifically Laravel, but we want to make sure, especially for things like inertia, we have really good support for the JavaScript side of inertia, for the JavaScript side of Livewire, but then also just, JavaScript in general. And if we solve inertia, that's obviously, React, Vue, Svelte, then we'll also effectively, those things should also flow nicely into people that aren't using inertia as well. And, even those kind of other frameworks that are all based on any of those technologies.
Yeah, definitely. Some love for the design. The design is so clean. Even the choice of fonts and colors are so nice. Yeah, it's crazy.
Hello, Robert. I used to work with Robert.
Oh, really? That's awesome. Hey, Robert. It's crazy to me how much you can show on even just like the dashboard page, but even just every single page, and it doesn't seem overwhelming from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, at some point I'd love to show some of the early versions before we had a designer where Tim and I, we were just, what can we do? And we just collected everything and we put it all on like one screen and almost deliberately of like, what does it look like to just show everything we have in that like index page? So for example, on like the request page, we had about probably 20 or 30 columns on this table of like the number of queries that happen, the number of outgoing requests, how long the query spent, all these sorts of things. And the challenge was kind of pairing it back to something that was actually consumable, what's actually important, and moving some of those other things to those more drilled in sections. So that's where we had, a lot of help from our designer on our team, Jeremy, who really helped work through what's important where and how to make this thing where there's just so much information and has all this information density, how to actually make it more easily digestible. And there's, subtle things like the colors, right? Like they draw your eye to problems. Things like using gray in here for the successful requests so that the errors themselves stand out more. And kind of just choosing, what's kind of shown in here. We've got like information in here in these cards. We have average and P95, but you can still hover on these and see the minimum and maximum duration of this particular route. But we found that when we had dedicated columns for all of those things, it got too overwhelming. So yeah, a ton of work has gone into making this, to show the information you need when you need it. And we'll continue to refine that as well as we kind of get more and more feedback from people.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because it's a lot to show. So you always want to make sure you show it in a way that one can surface kind of like the theme of this whole live chat has been is so that you can make your applications better for your users, and you want to make sure you surface the information instead of just hiding it away, and not the information that's important, but also the information that could be important.
Yeah, and I think like the issues feature is kind of our other way of kind of like just removing, like only showing you just the problems without all of the other data.
Okay.
Again, depending on the kind of the view you want to have, if you just want to look at things as a whole, you've got all these pages that just show you all the data. But if there's issues that Nightwatch has detected in your application, having those all on that one central screen where you can also, mark whether they've been resolved, all that sort of stuff, and kind of keep track of all of those problems, both performance and errors, just kind of makes it also feel less overwhelming, right? If you found a whole bunch of issues and we didn't have that issues screen, you'd kind of have to manually figure out which ones you've done and how you kind of track that. And then if they happen again, you've got to manually go and see, did I actually fix this? Is it fixed? So having that issues view that again just gives you that kind of collection of that problem, right? Like showing you the recent occurrences of where that happened so you can quickly dive into them, and seeing the overall stats about it is just, super, super powerful.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. A lot of people who said that they would also love to see a talk on that cedar as well. So like, it sounds like that's something that you got to start working on.
Other really cool thing the seeder does is because it seeds so much data and we want it to run fast, we built this concurrent seeder. So it uses Sparsy's fork process. And so it divides, so it's seeding 30 days worth of data. I think it divides that into 30 days, like into seeders that seed 1 day's worth of data, and it spreads those out over concurrent processes. And so we can configure based on our laptop specs, how many active processes we want seeding. So it actually seeds effectively in parallel to make the seeder run that much faster. And we can ramp up and down the numbers as well if we want to kind of stress the thing out a little bit more. What we found though, once we got Forge on here, 3 billion queries in Forge, I can't seed that locally. That's just too much fake data to seed. The seeder takes too long to run. So yeah, once you get into those real big applications,
big numbers.
And we know there's customers that have applications that are far bigger than Forge that really push this thing to its limits. But yeah, all the work we've done on the performance and the aggregating and all that sort of stuff makes that all possible.
Awesome. One more request to show is the cache resource, or the cache page. I think we might have briefly touched on it, or maybe we missed it.
No, so we haven't generally talked about the cache page too much. I don't have any super great sample data in this particular application, and we're still trying to figure out the best way to show a breakdown of cache information. So the challenge here is when you've got requests, they have routes, right? So if you jump over here, you could have multiple requests to this flights route. So if we jump into this one here, they all have these different numbers, but we can group these together on this page because there's a route associated with it, and the route kind of has this placeholder that makes it so that we know all the requests that happen to that route. We can kind of group them all together.
Okay.
With the cache, depending on how you use the cache, if you have you might use like a naming convention where you have the user ID like colon and then the user ID on a cache key.
Yeah.
There's no like formal definition of like how we know that this cache key and this cache key are actually like the same cache key but for two different users. So it's kind of hard to give that grouped breakdown. So this screen kind of, you can end up with so many keys that are all effectively the same key. So we're still working on some ideas for this screen to really highlight that. We have some overall stats and we can see, the hit ratios, hits, misses, writes, deletes, all that sort of information and failures. But this is, probably the least kind of fleshed out screen of Nightwatch that we're still trying to just figure out the best way of showing that information.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense because it's not as cut and dry of this is every single Laravel application that uses the cache in this particular way. That's more flexible of people can use it.
Even with outgoing requests, if we group by domain, because that is something like a URL does have structured data in there, but we can't group it by like route effectively. So if we click on this flight watch one here, we can see that there's some going to API flights 59/price and some going to API flights and then this like flight number. But from like it's hard to kind of say that this one here and this one here are the same. Well, in this case they were actually the same number, but like let's say these two here, it's hard to group those and say that those were like probably the same route on the external system.
Yeah.
Because they have different numbers and there's no like route definition of those. So for outgoing requests, grouping them by domain was a really kind of easy way to kind of give you that zoomed out view and then figure out where you want to zoom into. But with cache keys, it's just so much harder because they're just arbitrary strings, right?
Yeah.
So we have some ideas for that. We did, for Pulse, we basically put it on the user to write a regular expression to determine how their grouping would be. So they would have to go in and write regular expressions to match all of their cache key usage. But it's a fair bit of work to try and figure that out. And we want to try and make Nightwatch more just work out of the box with everything. So we'll still have certain features that you can configure if you want to customize them, but we want to make sure the out-of-box experience is just as good as it possibly can be.
Yeah. No, I love that. Awesome. A couple more questions, some on notifications. So like what kind of integrations do you have or planning on for notifications, and how would those work within like the issues tab, or even if like a server goes down and you want a notification, what are you thinking of for that within Nightwatch?
Yeah, so and that's just to clarify, that's not like the notifications feature where we not the metrics about the notifications your application is sending, but rather the notifications that Nightwatch sends to you. So obviously email, pretty standard sort of one, and a few other integrations, things like Slack, but then also just webhooks so that you can integrate with pretty much any service. And we'll continue adding as many services as, like any really common services, we can probably add kind of, dedicated integrations for. But there's always webhooks for, any sort of niche things where you just want our system to just ping some URL when an issue happens with some details about it. And then you can kind of connect it to any, internal system or anything else you want.
Awesome. Yeah. So it sounds like a lot of plans for flexibility with that to be able to get, because a lot of it really just comes down to kind of like what you said. You need the Nightwatch information to have and be visible when you want to dive in and try to make your application better. But it's also great for those times when something's broken, we need to fix it too.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Thank you, Liam. It says Josh and Jess are such a great combo for this Q&A style talk. I appreciate it. Jess has been awesome.
Thank you, Liam. I always enjoy chatting with you, Josh.
Yeah, like Hank said, if everyone can give a like, and if you're not subscribed, subscribe already, because it helps not only us give the ability to bring more information like this to a bunch of people, but the recording will be available for this whole talk. So sorry, Josh, we can't start over. I know I'd be fine with doing it, but I know Jess has important stuff to start working on as well. I think one other question, it seems like, let me find it again, because I think it's a good one to kind of maybe end it on the right. Maybe we'll do another one, but let's see. I missed it. Let me find it here. The most important question: when can I have it?
Very, very good question. So the answer to that is May. So that is right around the corner now. We've got a bunch of users already do have it through our early access program, and we're continuing to add more and more people to early access every day. So if you're not already on the waiting list at nightwatch.laravel.com, jump on there and you'll get it before everyone else, hopefully. And yeah,
there we go.
May for at least by May for everyone else.
Coming a lot sooner. Like it feels like May is going to be here before we know it. So like I looked down at the calendar and it was April already. I thought it was still, February. I thought we just launched cloud, but no, it's a couple months past February now. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Cam, thank you so much. And Liam, love for Jess. Jess must be called Arch because everything she builds hits the mark. Perfect.
Thank you, Liam.
But yeah, thanks so much, Jess. Is there anything else that you would like to say? Hey, either be watching for this, or maybe something you're excited about, or just what would be like your closing thoughts for people about getting excited for Nightwatch, or why you do what you do within Nightwatch?
Closing thoughts. I mean, when Taylor first kind of brought this idea up, I remember looking at like companies that do this sort of stuff where effectively every request into like your customer's application results in data in your application, as like probably the scariest thing to do in software development, because you're almost building something where you're going to get like a DOS attack from customers' own DOS attacks, for example, right? So dealing with this amount of data has been terrifying, but also ridiculously exciting. And so I've just had, like the team and I working on kind of this problem is probably the most challenging problem that I've ever had to work on, of how we deal with, billions, hundreds of billions, trillions of rows of data, which is just numbers like, that I can't even like comprehend, right? Like,
yeah, and not just that number, but also like every 10 seconds you're grouping all this information too. So it's fast, not just like a whole bunch of it.
100%. So it's just been an amazing experience to build this thing, and I'm really, really excited for everyone to get their hands on it and to see how it can improve their applications and just build the best Laravel applications that they possibly can. So yeah, I keep an eye out on the Laravel podcast. I'm gonna do a chat with Matt Stauffer a little bit more as well, talk about some more Nightwatch things. But yeah.
I love it. Yeah, so build the best applications best Laravel applications you can, and Nightwatch can help you do that. One last question. Can you run Nightwatch from a terminal inside NeoVim? Nightwatch.nvim.
I would love to. I mean, I think a lot of people know my love for the CLI is very, very strong. And you can probably see in the UI, there's definitely nods to kind of terminal interfaces. It kind of feels a little bit kind of terminally in some ways. And yeah, I mean, I would certainly love to have a terminal version of Nightwatch. I can't say it'll probably happen anytime soon, but I love the idea.
It's not out of the realm of the ordinary in that case.
Yeah.
There's a strong chance that it is possibly a possibility. Well, thank you so much, Jess. For those, again, who don't know, Jess Archer is the engineering team lead for all things Laravel Nightwatch, as well as the creator of a whole bunch of amazing things within the Laravel ecosystem. Thanks so much for being here, Jess. It was a pleasure getting to learn about Nightwatch, as well as just having your ability to answer questions. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for everyone that came along. I see most of the Nightwatch team is in the chat as well. Thank you all for coming and for everything you do for Nightwatch as well. So
thank you, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. Again, this is going to be a what is the difference between Nightwatch versus Batman? I didn't mean to click on that one, so I apologize, but thanks, Transcode, for being here. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. This is going to be a recording, so be sure to like, subscribe, press that notification bell. All these things help the Laravel team as well. But we're super glad for what Nightwatch is going to bring to the Laravel ecosystem and Laravel community, so you can make better Laravel applications.
Thank you.
Thanks, see you, everyone. Until next time.